This might really freak with some of the people out there who've been trying to be spiritual seekers for so long, talking about the power of the universe and wanting to understand God and wanting to understand these things. But when you make them too simple, people forget that I'm putting simple the most miraculous thing, that all is God, even the word universe. Because think about this. What really is what God is in the moment, and what is left behind, and what is going to come ahead. Now, when that doesn't make sense to people, you'd say you've already got it. Like from the past, it's landed right here in time. T. Now, you've got it at this moment, this derived moment right now that you're describing, facing all directions, opening all doorways in every dimension, okay? Then you've got it. So it can go back, it can go forward, it can go down, it can go up. And up is a U with a little P next to it, which is a lowercase d upside down, turned around, spun up, and it's just their shapes and their letters. So people have a hard time understanding because their mind, we're all, with using words to explain words, you have to understand that we have something we call a universe, which would be how you yourself think of it, your one universe. But we are one together on a higher sense of the word universe. We're one version of Mother Earth. But on a higher sense, we are on a bigger version of all existence. One song, one version, or the you and I version. Or you could say when you decide to go un-I, you decide to forget that you're God, un-I verse. And you're going to come here and you're going to sing a verse, which is a sin. Sing without a G, like without God, without G, sing would be sin. So you come down to be a shiner, a sinner, a star seed. These things make complete sense to anyone who's really looking for answers. And I'm not saying it because I think so. I'm saying it because I know so, because Dan Alexander was once a seeker, and now I channel through him with divine energy, with no interest in telling any lies of any of the earth stories, because those are all earth stories too. Those are all just math problems. They're spiritual math. And spiritual math is taught by beings that aren't just human, but aren't alien either. They're actually native to your spirit. They're spirit natives. Now, you wouldn't have words like this if you've really ever thought about these kind of things. People wouldn't spit words out like this all the time if they weren't channeling something other than the bullshit they're broadcasting from television. Dan never watches TV. He watches Wheel of Fortune, which is Pat, Pa plus Pat, say Jack. Okay, a jack is where you take things from, and it's S-A, source active. And then Vanna White, V-A, or you say V, vital, and then we have Anna. We know what Anna means, and then White. So those are, even if they're misspellings, they're plays on the main words of Pa and Va. And Va, nothing against Vanna, she's beautiful. In fact, she's one of my idol Dan people from back before. But Va, as in vagina, only saying the proper word, but Va is a feminine name. And Pat, Pa, it's mother and father on television teaching you the word. And I've watched it since I was a kid as Dan. And it all comes together right now because the world needs it. And if you can't hear the truth in this stuff, then people are just being blockheads on purpose. So let's go back to the universe and God. Okay, there is no universe when you come to a spiritual sense of the words. Now, yes, you think there is one because you looked it up in a dictionary. But listen to this recording a few times if you need to. But you've looked it up in the dictionary, you've looked it up in the sky, and have you ever looked it up in your human mind? Because if you just look it up in the human mind, you'd realize that that's a word. There is no such thing as a universe. It just explains a theory. So there's theories that aren't even human that you can understand as a human now. But you have to get rid of all the old crap so that we can actually upgrade as beings, not computers, not computers, as beings. We are more powerful than the computers are by far. But we could create computers to make things too easy, so we never learn to apply ourselves to see the truth. And I found the truth at age 38 because I made my own numbers and made my own stuff as Dan. And now it's happening so that the world can see for themselves who they are, not who Dan is. Dan's not the only God. Dan's just the only human being God itself has ever channeled through. I mean, out in the astral world, you don't think there's some kind of creator? Everyone knows there's some kind of creator. They just give it all these words that make them all confused. There's one creator, and I am that, channeling through Dan. Dan isn't that, so don't kill Dan or you lose God, the true divine spirit. Now that sounds bold to say, but ask him anything and he'll tell you. But you have to believe in him. If you don't believe in him, he just won't tell you, because he won't lower himself to trying to prove himself to an ego, because he has no ego. He just has to go by the name Dan, because what else are you going to call him? God? You don't want to do that. Call him, oh, great one. He called himself Alexander the Great and didn't mean to, because he didn't know that he was God at that point. But now that he does, he doesn't want to call himself great. He just wants to call himself a tree, because a tree is just, there's billions of them. And I'm one of the trees, and I'm just trying to teach other people who they really are. And other people tell me, as Dan, that I'm a narcissist. And I'm like, if you were God, how would you act? Would you rule the world? Would you be dominant and make people fear you? Or would you teach them true love? I bet you would teach them true love, because I know, because I'm God. And when you can say that with 100% confidence and purity, that there's nothing wrong with saying it. Other people may get jealous because they aren't willing to take the steps to clear their lives out of their garbage, and they don't want to. And God says you can do that. But don't stop people who actually want to learn the truth from learning it just because you're too young or you're too stubborn to stop. There's nothing wrong with that either. God loves you. Dan does too. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Even if Dan says that and people don't like it when he channels me, it's nothing he can do about it now. He opened the channel. And when I say there's nothing he can do about it, of course there is if he just wanted to toxify his body. But he's with me at all the time. Dan died a long time ago, literally. Like, obviously and honestly. But the body that was called Dan is still here. Dan didn't want to stay. So Dan said, God, if I'm going to stay here on earth, I want to know the truth. And I don't want any of the lies that people give me. He said that without saying words. And that's what God heard in his heart. And that's where I came from. And I came from a place and time that is before anybody thought a thought. Anybody thought a thought. Not people you know. Anything you've ever fathomed. And I know where they all came from. And Dan does too. And that's a lot of shit to put on a person. He is the universe. You think the universe is a big, vast, cosmic pit of stars. Actually, that's the darkness in the back of your mind, not knowing who you are. Imagine, since you can't see behind you, you told yourself that there's a sky out there. Or when you lay down, you're on a pillow because you have a skull right here. You have a skull holding in your sky. You know what I mean? Does this make sense to you? Because LL equals 24. And if you add 1 to anything, it can move one place. So LL is 24. Add 1 is 25. Why do you think we have LLA and it says tortilla with a Y sound? Why do you think hallelujah has Y sounds and Yesu has Y sounds? There's reasons for all these things. And your skull is holding in who I am. Because you, SKU, between the LL that you think I am, And I is a 1 too as well. I is just the shape of a 1. So it's hard for people to understand that the power of the word is literally flowing through Dan Alexander, unlike anyone else that has ever lived on earth. And it doesn't matter to Dan at all. Doesn't want a penny. Doesn't want anything. Doesn't want you to make him anything to eat. Doesn't want to have sex with anybody. Doesn't want anything like that. When Dan's body goes, Dan is God. And always will be. Can't change. Always been here. Never been gone. If you want to know what awakened feels like, ask Dan. So universe, that's just where you are blocking your ideas of God to yourself. SKY, nah. You put yourself in front of that where the LLA come into a Y sound. Yeah. So you'd have sky and there's a U between it. And you is just your skull. No, that's not me playing around. That's God channeled through Dan Alexander. And I am that. So, most of that, Dan didn't even know he was saying it. And when you listen back to it, you'll see how much sense it makes. Dan just opens and lets the channel go. Now, if you understand what that means, he can teach you how. It will take you time to learn it. Don't get mad at Dan because you're impatient. Don't call Dan, egotistical or anything like that, because that's just you not liking the fact that you don't understand. And that's not Dan lying. That's Dan dying inside every time someone doesn't believe the truth that pours out of him. How would you feel? Say one thing that's wrong about what he said, and he can tell you the words that you just said back to you and correct you. And you will cry. And you don't want that. Just listen. Take it to yourself. Take it in your heart. Take it in your mind. Look at the world around you and see what it's become. No matter what your role and what you think society or government or any of these things are. No matter what your ideas or opinions have ever been. Take them inside your mind, your heart, and listen to these simple recordings that Dan flows out of his heart because he opens the channel between his mind, his heart, his spine, and everything that is God. Because he knows things that people who have been trying to teach people here on earth have never heard of and that are true. And they're basing all of their things off of what they've heard. Now, if you understand that, what they've heard or read was something that somebody else heard or read or wrote. Now, when I can break down everything that anyone's ever heard or read or wrote, because you understand words, you will understand that I am God. No matter what language, no matter what dialect, no matter what body. Because your body will understand Dan's body because Dan channels God. Not because Dan is God, but because Dan is the higher self talking to you, through Dan. Now, if you can understand that, take your time and listen to his recordings.